Now, continuing to talk about crime and certainly what we're seeing in South Africa, the spate of rampant murders and violent mass killings, as well as general criminality, have reinforced the country's reputation of being a violent country with one of the highest murder rates in the world. During his State of the Nation address last week, President Cyril Ramaphosa declared load shedding a national state of disaster due to a crippling energy crisis. Now, on Monday, a state of disaster was declared owing to the extent of flooding that has caused destruction. A question has been asked on whether the levels of lawlessness and criminality in South Africa do not warrant a state of emergency. Well, Eldred de Klerk, Senior Associate of the African Center for Security and Intelligence Praxis, joins us to talk about this. Eldred, thanks very, very much for joining us and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Leanne, and it's a pleasure to be here.
A state of emergency regarding crime. I mean, is that a conversation we should be having at this point?
Yes, it is. In terms of the act, where the president can declare a state of emergency, and that will allow for 21 days of extraordinary effort, and it can be local, provincial, and national. So there are areas where there's been engagement with communities, and the communities have cried for help. We've seen the deployment of the police, and yet the areas remain fundamentally unsafe and far from stable. So the state of emergency allows for the restoration of peace and stability, and it also allows the state to deploy the South African police and with the assistance, if necessary, of the Defence Force, and of course all that has to be enacted through Parliament. So it can be done, and a lot of us would argue that it should be done, because we've seen a systematic attack on state institutions and public administration departments, and we've seen a hollowing and weakening out of them that has rendered them either failing or completely ineffective. So there's questionable performances that hasn't met the standards of providing basic public safety to everybody in the country.
It is a great concern for every single one of us, because we are all at risk. We really are. I mean, every day that, whether we leave our houses, whether we're in our houses, whether we go to a restaurant, whether we go and fetch our children from school, whether it doesn't matter where you are a target. It has become that apparent. It really has. And I mean, when we look recently at the country's not only recent but perpetual murders, which have been continually amped up over some time now. What are your views on this? And I mean, even Reuters' article basically saying that South Africa, with all of these killings, has basically reinforced the country's bleak status as a global center for murder.
And it's time that we acknowledge where we're at. It may not be politically expedient to acknowledge failings. It may not be politically expedient to say that we are ailing and struggling in certain key performances as a sovereign nation. And yet we need to let go of that. The minute we have South Africans are fundamentally honest, we have a great sense of humor, but even we can only take so much. So a declaration of a state of emergency, we could even do it under the Disaster Management Act, because it's coupled with endemic poverty, it's coupled with great and high unemployment, and we need an extraordinary mobilization of resources. And I'm talking not money necessarily, but human resources, and departments working in a coordinated manner to a common plan. Because what the National Disaster Act says, and if we use the provisions of the Act, that says there needs to be a national disaster framework, and there needs to be a plan that the public needs to be aware of, and there needs to be clear roles and responsibilities for each designated department, and there's a designated lead department for this. So if we do it, if we use the same provisions of the National Disaster Act, and we declare a state of emergency, we know that it's for 21 days, and every day we can have the designated department come on Morning Live and explain how the money's been used, who are the service providers, and how the people in a specific area, let's say Vosloorus or Randburg in Cape Town or wherever, has been used and working together to a common plan, where the money's been spent, who it's been spent on, and what it's been spent on, and then how the resourcefulness, the resilience, and the energies of our local people have been put to work. We can be put to work with a bucket and a sponge, with a broom and a spade, and if nothing else, we can clean the areas up. We can go door to door and register who's there, understand who's vulnerable. We can deploy every single department in terms of health, education, home affairs, and social development to ensure that street by street, block by block, we start taking back our neighborhoods, because it's not being governed by public administration at the moment. It's being governed by organized crime. So let's take back those neighborhoods, and a state of emergency. It was done post a Second World War, I think it was, with the Marshall Plan. And many of us have been arguing that we need a Marshall Plan for South Africa. So let's use the relevant legislation to exactly effect a Marshall Plan.
Yeah, you know, I love how you say South Africans have got a good sense of humor, and we do tend to make a joke about our issues and circumstances. But, you know, if there is one aspect of our lives we cannot make a joke of, it is this. Because, you know, many people say, load shedding, perhaps we can live around that. Flooding, it's a natural disaster. It's devastating, but it is something that we need to work around. Crime, murder, risking our lives every day. This is something that is not a joke, and it's certainly, we cannot carry on like this. I mean, even yesterday, during yesterday's SONA debate, EFF leader Julius Malema basically said that the country needs to fight criminality from within the police ministry. I mean, this has been a widespread allegation about the country's police service for years and years, where they've been accused of taking bribes, where they've been accused of being involved in these criminal activities. I mean, people see this. They know what's going on in communities. How do we deal with this? Is leadership strong enough for this?
Well, that's the thing. An acknowledgement that we have a problem, a commitment to a plan, and we have great ideas that's already there, coupled with, this is the key you just said, leadership, because we need public leadership, and more importantly, we need public will. Now, public will is not the sense of I'm ill intent, I'm ill-willed. No, public will says you put action to your words, and what we've seen is words, and we've seen a complete or dire lack of action. We also need to know who are the people who's advising on any of the strategies or plans that we don't see, because we need to understand what their ideological worldview is, how they conceive and see South Africa, and what role for good governance and transparency is taken into account in this plan. So as plans are made with people, not for people, and as plans put people to work collectively to a joint vision of a shared future that's safe for all of us, regardless of race, color, creed, and status, then we will be on the way to doing stuff. And of course, we might not get everything right. Of course, we're dealing with wicked problems and hybrid threats that seems to be crippling and leaving us with a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. But if you do it street by street, block by block, area by area, and we take every one piece of a cat. How do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant. Not that you want to eat elephants because they're present in South Africa, but you eat it one mouthful at a time. Any difficult thing can be tackled, provided we have the public will to do so, and we commence with it. You know, we need to start. We need to see action for all the words that's been spoken, and I think this is what Julius Malema and all of us are asking for, not that he's necessarily the voice piece for all of us, but he's absolutely correct when he says there's been no action and stuff.
Yeah. I want to talk about leadership a little bit more. And let's look at our Police Minister, Becky Cele. You know, at the moment the incident, the devastating incident happened over the weekend where we saw the murder of AKA and, of course, Tibbs as well. You know, people came out and said, right, here we go. The usual is about to take place. The minister will come out, he'll go to the scene, he will state that, you know, they will not leave a stone unturned in solving this crime. And, you know, all the promises, all of the, basically people laid out exactly what is going to happen, just bringing up crimes that have happened in the past that never, ever get solved. And this just carries on all the time. You know, Is he the man for the job?
Well, firstly, with all due respect to the minister and his roles, he's not the executive authority or accounting officer of the South African Police. My preference would be that the minister stays out of it and that we see a man or woman in uniform who's directly responsible for the day-to-day functioning and planning and operational execution and implementation of the police, deciding on tactics and resources. The minister needs to create, and whether it's through a state of emergency or a disaster, the necessary capability, which we don't have, it's been eroded, and deploy the necessary resources in concord or in jointly with other departments who are critical in all of this, including working with private sector actors. We can't say Vodacom for certain services that they've been rendering to the police. That's a question of leadership within the police. So my preference would be that the minister stays out of it, that we see a man or woman in uniform who has necessary credibility, take responsibility for informing us what the plan is going forward, and taking us in their confidence day to day, that they not just do it once off, but that there's feedback and follow through and follow up, that we see the unfolding story, that we understand what has been done, and we understand the successes and even the failures that there's been. South Africa, we starve for information, and if we have anything else from the sense of humor, we are creative people who will make up a story if we need to. So like good fisher folk, we will tell you how big that fish was that I caught. So for us to avoid speculation and rumor, we need quality information, not just we're going to do this. We've done this. We've done it with this person. This is how you've been involved. This is what I expect from you as South African citizens in a particular neighborhood beyond just providing us with information. And we roll that plan out and we keep each other informed. We have great public radio. We have great public TV. Use those platforms for having an honest conversation as to what is working, where it's working, and what is expected of me and how I can help.
Eldred, we got to leave it there. Thank you. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for talking to us here on Morning Live about the rampant crime in South Africa. Eldred de Klerk is the Senior Associate of the African Centre for Security and Intelligence Praxis on the urgent matter of crime, violence, murder and general lawlessness in the country.